look at the regrets of the dying. Go find out what people who are in the last days of their lives regret not having done. And I can promise you that not a single person who's dying and looking back at their life and regretting not having done something is going to say, gee, I wish I'd cleared my inbox every day. I wish I'd answered more emails. I wish I'd watched much more TV. No one says that. They say things like, I wish I'd been there for my kids when they were growing up. I wish. I'm Dawson Church, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
I love it. Dawson, thank you for taking the time. This is going to be so fun because I just love your magic, man. I love your energy. I love what you're about. EFT, energy psychology. Thank you for taking the time.
Trey, if we have half as good a time in the next hour as we've had talking off the air in the last 10 minutes, it's going to be spectacular.
Absolutely. There it is. There it is. I love that laugh. So I was watching one of your videos and content about synchronicities, right? I don't remember what program that was on or what podcast, but you brought up a story about a cell phone and LA, and you were at a conference or something there, and you lost your phone at a beach, right? It's funny that you say this because 2 months ago I was in LA, and 2 months ago I was in Manhattan Beach. So I truly resonated with that story because one, it's a synchronicity for me, and two, you're coming on the show today. So there's a little bit of, a little bit of universal winking going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. The cool thing too, Trey, is research shows that those people who notice the universal winking, who spot it and who pay attention to it, they get more of it. Skeptics get less of it. So,
What is that though, right? Like, because I feel like I don't want it to be just like a brain pattern recognition, right? Like of me, oh, I'm just recognizing this all the time now. Is it really a universal winking, or is it just the brain picking up a pattern?
I think it's a combination of both. I think you're more attuned to things. I'll tell you one really outrageous story that just happened very recently, and it was a woman who wanted to go to Burning Man, and she wanted to go so badly but she made her choice to go there too late. All the tickets were sold out, and if you know anything about Burning Man tickets, there are like 70,000 people at Burning Man. They have like, I don't know, 10 to 1 excess of people who want to go. So there are like 700,000 people trying to get those 70,000 tickets. It's really hard to get a ticket for Burning Man. And so she said, I'm just going to get on a plane and I'm just going to go fly out to Reno, Nevada, and just trust the universe. So she just boarded the plane, got on the plane, no ticket to Burning Man. In fact, no transportation to Burning Man either. And the guy next to her, she got talking to him, and he said, oh, funny thing, I was supposed to go with my best friend, and he got COVID last week, and I have his ticket right here. So she had a ticket to Burning Man. So that was, interesting that happened. So they get off the plane, they walk down the steps, and they go into this regional airport, and she sees this guy dressed in a business suit, and that's unusual attire for Reno, Nevada. And the other weird thing about him is she notices that his shoes are shiny, but they have a patina, a veneer of dust on them. And so she walks up to this total stranger and says, what brings you here? And he said, oh, I have to come back from Burning Man early because there's a crisis at my company. So I've had to fly back from Burning Man. And they chatted for a while. And he said, and the pilot who flew me here from the Burning Man airport is flying back with an empty plane. Would you and your new friend here like to go with him? So they got a flight back. Now, was it, amazing synchronicity? Yes. Was there pattern recognition in there? Absolutely, because she noticed the dust on the guy's shoes. And Burning Man Playa, the desert is very, very dusty, distinctive dust. So she saw that. So I think it's partly intention, but our intention shapes our our direction of our focus. And so she was heavy attention, but then her attention was focused at cues in the environment, and you pick them up if you want to see them. If you think the world's a grim and miserable place, the world pretty much turns into a grim and miserable place because you see all the grim and miserable cues there are in the world. If you think, as I do, that the world is a place of wonder and you wake up every morning and the universe is going to bring you all kinds of good things, then you just have an absolute blast with every day. So I strongly recommend the latter approach.
Well, has it always been like that for you, Dawson, right? Like having that strong positive outlook at the very beginning of the day and kind of allowing that to unfold for you? Like, I mean, how did you I guess how did you evolve your brain into that mindset?
We can talk about evolving our brains a little bit too, because one of the most interesting things about the new neuroscience studies, so old MRI studies from the 90s, 2000 are interesting, but the new ones, we're using high resolution MRIs. Like I just did one, a randomized controlled trial using super high resolution new Siemens MRIs from Germany. And like we can get down to the level of an individual neuron, and we can see neural growth in real time, and that's super cool. So we know people have a thought, and you literally see it becoming a thing in terms of neural wiring and firing. But after a while, you just have a basically happy brain. You practice this long enough, you've done enough firing that results in enough wiring to where your brain anatomy is very substantially different. And again, just jumping ahead here, this randomized controlled trial I recently finished, it took 28 days, Trey. 28 days to actually measure changed brain anatomy after doing eco meditation, my little simple meditation method, for 1 month, 28 days, 22 minutes a day. We already saw enough neural firing to where there was neural wiring and significant structural anatomical change in two important brain areas. So that's the cool thing, is we can measure this. But how I got there and how I got to doing this was just by pretty much the way many people in coaching or psychology or therapy have got there, which was starting out being miserable. I mean, when I was a kid, I was so miserable. I remember being, basically being suicidal when I was a kid. I never took it as far as actually, trying to really kill myself, but I certainly was. I had no interest in being here, and every week I just couldn't stand to. I hated being around people. They returned the compliment by hating being around me, and I tell the story in one of my books about being 15 years old and walking past a full-length mirror. This is in the hippie days, Woodstock. I had long hair. I had a bag of books slung over my shoulder, and I looked at myself, and as I stared at my own reflection, these words just popped into my head. Those are the saddest eyes I've ever seen. I realized I was so absolutely utterly screwed. I needed to fix myself. So I went and joined an ashram, a spiritual community, went and lived communally, learned the great religions, the great tradition, Aldous Huxley, Alan Watts, all these great spiritual teachers, Ram Dass. And, I got a little bit happier over the years, and I wasn't quite so depressed, but I was still pretty miserable. And then when I turned 45, I was having a kind of a crisis in my life, and I said, I'm going to make the commitment to meditate every single day. And so I began to do that every day. Now, I'd learned meditation when I was 15, but learning it, dabbling in it is one thing. Reading a book, taking a course, cool, how nice. But you need to do it. Absolutely apply yourself. And I made that commitment, and I had to get up at 5:30 a.m. to do that because my kids I was a single dad. They had to be at school early. So it was really painful to drag my ass out of bed at 5:30 in the morning. It's like, oh, yeah, well, but I'll do this the first day and the second day and the third day. And I just kept on slogging away at it, not feeling a lot of shift happening in my life. But then within a year, it began to change. I learned EFT tapping, energy psychology. I made a career change. I got out of book publishing, which I was in, and then began to get into energy therapies. And I found myself getting dramatically happier. And then so I'd done a lot of research. Had a whole career, 20-year career doing research on PTSD, because I figured, where can we use these therapies most effectively? And at that time, 2004, 2005, there were a lot of Americans coming back from Iraq, the Iraq War, and they had PTSD. So I was researching, I was doing clinical trials, I was gathering research teams, I was going to Washington, D.C. to present to members of Congress and the VA on these therapies, and really focused on bringing them into the treatment of PTSD. And I'd recovered from PTSD at that point myself too, so I wanted to bring this to a lot of other people. And so that was the initial research focus. But once we got validated, we gotten approved by the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, I then really went full circle and began to study meditation again and say, when I read Rumi, and you read Rumi, read Carlos Castaneda, read St. Francis, read St. Teresa, these people, I mean, they're in a level of bliss that the average person can't understand. I wanted to understand how you got that happy. So I began to look at the research, look at neurotransmitters like anandamide. Ananda is a Sanskrit word for bliss. And people have lots of anandamide in their brains when they're doing effective meditation. So I began to look at those peak experiences. And what I discovered, along with many other neuroscientists, are now realizing that everyone has those neural circuits. Everyone has anandamide. Everyone has oxytocin, serotonin, all the other ingredients we need to feel that good. It's just a matter of turning on the circuitry, releasing the neurotransmitters, and you start to feel fantastic. And then you habituate yourself to that every day, and you don't want to settle for you don't want to settle for one bad day. Honestly, you wake up in the morning, you feel a little off that day, you just go and meditate a little bit longer, and you turn yourself around and you shift your attitude. So it's a matter initially of practice and determination. After a while, you do enough neural firing, you have the wiring there to support yourself. It becomes literally who you are.
I want to find out more about you, man. So you go from book publishing to energy psychology. I mean, that's kind of both ends of the spectrum, right? Like, I feel like that's jumping off like a cliff, right? Like going into something totally different. Like, and you're 45, and I'm sure you had, I think you said you had kids and you're a single dad. What was that like for you? Like as a human being, as exploring the unknown, as in I'm a father, I have kids, I have responsibilities, and I'm going into something totally different. What was that like for you?
Well, one thing I did is when I had kids, one of the things I also recommend everyone do is read books and look at blog posts about people who are near death. Look at the regrets of the dying. Go find out what people who are in the last days of their lives regret not having done. And I can promise you that not a single person who's dying and looking back at their life and regretting not having done something is going to say, gee, I wish I'd cleared my inbox every day. I wish I'd answered more emails. I wish I'd watched more TV. No one says that. They say things like, I wish I'd been there for my kids when they were growing up. I wish I had paid attention to my physical well-being. I wish I'd loved the people that I love more. Like, why have this much love? Why not have that infinite love? So I was reading that sort of material, aware of that when my kids were young, when they were born. And so after I got divorced when my kids were very, very little, I thought, I'm just going to make these kids my priority. So I worked very little for a few years. I kind of scraped along financially. I was kind of broke a lot of the time, didn't make a lot of money, but I was putting in a lot of time with my kids. And the payoff for doing that is just fabulous. You aren't looking back in your 60s and 70s and 90s and saying, gee, I wish I'd spent more time with them. You look back and say, well, I wish I'd earned a bit more money then, but I didn't need more money to have more fun with them. And so that's the cost benefit. And then love, Trey, there's a book I may get around to writing sometime, but I've collected data on set points, love, people. Actually, I'll go even further. Orgasm. Most people are under orgasming. That's a word I just made up. They're not fully experiencing their orgasms. They have set points. We have set points for pleasure. And again, the neurochemicals that flood our brains during orgasm are a lot like the neurochemicals in the brains of a Tibetan monk or a Franciscan nun or Rumi or Saint Teresa. They are these ecstatic or orgasmic hormones. That's why these Hafiz writes about my beloved, and all of these great figures talk about the intense experience. So we're having these really limited experiences with our set points. We hit our set point for serotonin or dopamine, and we shut down our orgasm. Laughter. Babies laugh 300 times a day on average. Adults, 20 times a day. Why? Why are you shutting down your laughter? Why aren't you living your full potential? And it's because of a bunch of conditioning you got. And so limitation, orgasm, love, enjoyment, pleasure, the amount of energy you run through your body. And all of these are set points we learn very early in life. And we stick in these little boxes for most of our lives, trying to please people who are, at this point in my life, all the people I'm trying to please when I was 6 years old and 8 years old, they're all dead. But they're in my head still telling me, you can't do that, you can't feel this, you can't earn that much money, you can't be this prosperous, you can't feel this good. And we as human beings have circuitry in our brains that just is meant for ecstasy. Do we have circuitry meant for depression and threat avoidance and all the things required to look for bad stuff in our environment? We have that circuitry, but we have other circuitry as well. And that circuitry can drive us to that sense of well-being. So when I was a single dad, I was really being with my kids, experiencing them, not wanting to have regrets carried later into life. And then I began to discover these things that really unlock your joy. I questioned my set points. Like when I got divorced, I just want to tell one more little story here.
I love it.
I wanted to, we had a terrible time when we got divorced because our divorce was really easy and congenial. So I'm still good friends with my ex-wife, and so we didn't have a difficult time in the divorce. But my mom died right about that time. Her dad died. Our company went under. We had a big company together. So all kinds of bad things happened in a very short period of time. And we'd had company leased cars. And so for the first time in 10 years, I was buying a personal car. And I thought, I'd like a red Cadillac convertible. And my wife thought it was a terrible idea, thought I needed a minivan instead. And so I decided just to go and buy the car I wanted. And I was divorced, I had the money, and I went and bought the red Cadillac convertible. And part of me was still so afraid that if I did what I really wanted and gave myself what I really wanted, something bad would happen. And Trey, nothing bad happened. Actually, good things happened. I loved the Cadillac convertible. I got the custom license plate Ecstasy, and me and my two kids would ride down the road with the hood up, with the top down, and we'd just be yelling Ecstasy. So, you want to just give yourself those experiences, and things weren't always easy, but I was on the right track at that point.
Sure. I wonder what the neuroscience is when you're starting to do the things that you want to do, right? And not fear the consequences of that. Like what is going on in the brain? What is going on in the body? What is it releasing? What kind of energy is that producing in the universe to attract more to you and to attract more to your experience?
It is, and it comes with a warning label, because when is it your set point and when is it protective? So, for example, I love certain sports. I love, for example, mountain biking. And any dry day, I will probably be out mountain biking for half an hour or an hour. And if it's raining, yesterday it was raining, and I thought, I'm just going to go mountain biking anyway. So I went and got my mountain bike all muddy. And so you push yourself, you push the joy, but you don't push yourself to the danger point. And the danger point is when you fall and break your collarbone. Okay, so you don't want to push yourself. Now, I was on a coaching call yesterday, and I had a bunch of people ask me coaching questions about, how far do you push yourself? And I said, I can't tell you. I can tell you what my set point is, what my skill point is for going around those curves on the mountain bike and not falling, getting really happy at the challenge, but not falling. But somebody else that was a 20-something young guy a third of my age, who was mountain biking, he could go much faster. So you don't want to go and do things that are going to exceed your abilities to master them. So there's this what in flow research is called the challenge skills ratio. You want to challenge your skills a little bit. But if I were to go and do a mountain biking course that was, say, 5% harder than is my comfort level, that would feel really challenging and feel really great. If I were to go on a black diamond course, I'd break my neck. So you have to just make wise choices. Now, this is something I want to do. I'm going to feel fulfilled doing this. I'm going to challenge myself every day a little bit further to excel a little bit more. But don't say, I'm going to double my income this year. I'm going to go and move to this house that has a $25,000 a year $25,000 a year month payment. Don't do stuff that's beyond that a reasonable boundary, and no one else can tell you what that is. A coach can guide you. Only you know for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of the information that you talk about in your videos and your books comes through meditation, right? And the science that backs that up. When you're doing your year meditation back when you were 45 every day, every morning at 5:30, one, was 5:30 the best time to meditate? And two, what was going on with your brain after your meditation?
So meditation conditions your brain, and the reason you really need to meditate in the morning is, and I just insist on this, I have a course with Mind Valley, and it's called Mystic Brain. I have my newest book is called Bliss Brain. And in all my books and all my programs, I have a new one coming out called 21 Day Walk with Your Higher Power. So in the Higher Power course, in all my courses, I always advocate meditating first thing in the morning. Because what happens otherwise, you wake up, you're a little bit groggy. Now, if you look at the brain activity going on, you've been in sleep, either deep sleep or shallow sleep, for the last roughly 8 hours. And so in deep sleep, your brain is in a very slow cycle called delta, 0 to 4 bursts a second. So between 0 and 4 times a second, your neurons are firing at that in that deep sleep state. Every roughly an hour, 90 minutes, your brain speeds up a bit into 4 to 8 cycles a second, and that is theta sleep. And you dream. You have your eyes move around rapidly for 5 minutes or so. You dream, drop back into delta. When you wake up, you get into theta, then you go up into alpha, this dreamy, floating space that emerges before full wakefulness. And then when you're awake, you're in beta. So when you're awake and you're in beta, your mind is very active, your brain activity is much, much faster in terms of the firing of your neurons, and you start to do stuff. And you start to look around you and think, okay, what's my day hold? I'm getting ready to get dressed now. Do these clothes match? Do I have 2 left shoes here? So all kinds of things you're worried about, the challenges of the day, all these things flood your mind, and you've lost that dreamy state of theta and delta. Theta and delta are the states of not only of sleep and dream, also of hypnosis, trance, super learning. So if instead of thinking about your day, and for goodness sake, do not pull out your phone and read the news or look at social media first thing in the morning. This is your most creative time, your most precious time, when you're closest to that state of floaty bliss of theta and delta. So if you use that first thing in the morning time to meditate, like Taylor Swift. I just read about Taylor Swift recently. I was looking for celebrities who meditate, and Taylor Swift, brilliant singer, she meditates the very first thing in the morning when she wakes up. A lot of meditators do that who are wise. And so now you're in this dreamlike, super learning trance, and now you move into meditation and you start to feel really good. Anandamide, that neurotransmitter, has the same chemical structure as THC, the active molecule in marijuana. Serotonin, you make lots of serotonin, lots of dopamine. Serotonin has the same molecular structure as psilocybin, magic mushrooms. You start to get all these neurotransmitters in your brain. You feel absolutely wonderful after a few minutes of meditation in that deep state at the start of the day. And now you are framing your day with positivity, joy, equanimity, bliss, awe, gratitude, and that's how you move into the day. Now, stuff happens, and everyone's day is not going to be perfect, and maybe within 2 hours you've had several of things that are going to disturb you or make you upset. but you primed yourself. And go read the research on priming. Tony Robbins has a great video on priming. You primed your whole experience for joy and creativity. And we're now doing a series of studies on people's productivity at work and their flow states during the day. And this is unpublished data. It'll be published in a peer-reviewed journal next year. But just the data I've got so far shows that use the simple meditation techniques early in the morning, and your flow state within a month is going to rise by about 20%. 20% greater flow. Your productivity rises over 20%. In our follow-up research now, we're showing that you do that for a month and your productivity rises 26%. Now think about that. That means you're getting done in 3 days what used to take you 4 days. 26% rise in productivity. Anecdotally, there are people who get much bigger increases. One woman emailed me earlier this week. She said, I think my increase in productivity is more like 40% since I began to use eco meditation. So you want to do it early in the day, frame your day for joy, and then the results show that you're dramatically more productive as you go through the week.
Man, how smart are you, man? I'm listening to you, and I feel like you're reading off cue cards or something. You have so much. You have all this data, all this analytics. I'm just like, wow. Like I'm doing research right now in meditation, and I have a hard time remembering what the statistics talk about love and kindness meditations.
Trey, it was funny because before the interview began, it's the end of my workday. I got up early in the morning to meditate, and I was thinking, geez, I'm so tired. I'm brain dead.
Man, that is awesome. So I'm learning how to be more in my heart state, right? My heart space. I've heard you talk about this before. I went into a morning meditation the other day. I think it was yesterday. My week has been so hectic. But I went into the morning meditation, and what I considered to be source, what I considered to be the infinite, gave me a download, kind of a vision that I need to go more into my heart space. And that is where our true being resides. And that's where I will experience greater happiness and positive emotions. And after I got up, synchronicities started like happening like crazy. It was actually the day after Halloween. My daughter and her friends went as a bunch of M&Ms, but before we went out to trick or treat, they were downstairs in my gym on the treadmill. Not on the treadmill, but they were placing books, and we have VHS tapes downstairs and VCRs, and for watching old videos. And I was clearing them off the treadmill to go run, and I picked up one of the VHS tapes after my meditation, and I flipped it over just to see what it was, and it said, and the title was "Where the Heart Is," and I'm like, this is like literally like 30 minutes after my meditation. So the day goes forth, and I'm just kind of like in my knowing, trying to be in my heart more. I come home from work, having kind of a rough day, and my wife gets takeout, Chinese takeout. So I get a fortune cookie, and I have it right up here. Right. It says, this is at the end of my day after this meditation and after the first synchronicity. It says, make decisions from the heart and use your head to make it work out.
Oh, beautiful.
I mean, I don't even know how to explain it, right? Like I couldn't make that up if I tried. And I say this to people, and people look at me like, what are you talking about, man? That's just, that's probably that, whatever you want to call it. That's not, it's nothing. But to me, it means something because I had this powerful imagery. I've had this powerful meditation, and then I've had these synchronicities happen to me. Have you had similar things happen to you during your meditations?
Yes, I find that there are many synchronous things happening in my life. One of the ways that shows up is I write science books, and they're hard science, so you can't be guessing. You have to know the facts, and you have to base it on studies. You have to read a lot of science and then translate that science into language that is understandable to the average person. And what I find is, as I'm writing, that colleagues will email me studies, and I'll get just the studies I need for the chapter I'm working on now. So like when I wrote my book, Mind to Matter, I have a chapter near the end where I just have a little box. I say, okay, I'm writing a book about mind to matter, about how our thoughts become things. And here's all the hard science behind how they do become things. And here are all the synchronicities that happen in the writing of Mind to Matter. Just all kinds of things happen. So yeah, absolutely. If you notice them, there are more of them, and you place yourself in that synchronous zone. Now, one of the cool things is that this is an imagination. There are a lot of ways of demonstrating this, but one of the ways which I think is most meaningful in terms of macro and micro is a series of studies done by the HeartMath Institute and my dear friend Roland McCready, who's the chief scientist there. And they study people in heart coherence and the difference between master manifestors, people who manifest, who have a lot of synchronicities, things work out for them, and people who struggle is coherence. And I have images there from EEGs in the book. And you'll see people who are not in coherence, who have non-coherent brains, and you'll see their brain waves are all over the place. They're just like scattered and they're not in sync. You look at a meditator, look at a person who's a great manifester, and their brain waves are highly in sync. And in this series of studies done by HeartMath, they measure the heart coherence of people over the course of a month. So it's a 1 month study looking at heart coherence and how coherent they were and their degree of heart coherence over the course of 30 days. They then superimpose that on the macro. And the biggest macro we can measure easily in the universe is solar flares. So the sun is emitting solar flares. They're unpredictable. There's a lot of sunspot activity some days, some months, not very much other months. But what the HeartMath people have done is they measure solar activity, which affects electromagnetism on Earth. So as a solar wind rushes by the Earth at about 2 million miles an hour, it distorts the Earth's magnetic field. And we can measure these frequencies, and the harmonics of these frequencies as the solar wind passes by. So they're measuring this big cycle, the solar wind, these geomagnetic frequencies. And in this amazing image at the end of the book, I overlay those solar frequencies for a month and the heart coherence of this highly coherent person, and the two graphs match each other. So not only is this person internally coherent, this person is coherent with geomagnetic cycles the size of the solar system and probably much larger. And this person is now in sync with everyone else in the world who is also in coherence. So now we have a whole planet of people where either they're in coherence or they're not in coherence, and those that are in coherence are in coherence together. So they find each other, they do things together, they do projects together, they make discoveries together. There's so many Nobel Prizes given to people who made independent discoveries of exactly the same thing at the same time, continents apart. So yeah, absolutely, you are in sync when you're like that. And though that synchronicity is real, I began writing the chapter on synchronicity in Mind to Matter thinking, oh, I'll talk about Carl Jung and synchronicity and how he thought it was part of the natural order. There is a lot of hard science behind synchronicity, and you'll be amazed when you delve into it and see just how real these phenomena are.
Man, I can listen to you talk all day, man. We're talking about solar flares and brain heart coherence. I mean, I don't know where else I'm getting this type of information from, but besides Dr. Dawson Church, EFT tapping, right? Does that induce brain heart coherence, or is that like something totally different?
It increases coherence, but meditation, effective meditation really increases coherence. So there are two things I teach primarily. One is EFT tapping, and that is to clear trauma. Because if we're traumatized, then it affects our lives radically. Traumatized people with PTSD, especially childhood trauma. I just got done speaking to a psychiatry conference where we looked at the effect of childhood trauma on adults. And people who are traumatized as adults and then don't heal have more cancer, more heart disease, more diabetes, more obesity, more hepatitis. All kinds of things in their bodies are going really wrong over the course of the next 40, 50, and 60 years. They have much shorter lifespans, much shorter health spans. So trauma really affects people. And so that's job number one. If you're trying to have peak experiences, reach the mountaintop, be in those elevated states, and you're traumatized, you close your eyes to meditate, and often you'll have a flashback, an intrusive thought. You just can't hold it all together. There's one Iraq veteran called Bryce Rogo who wrote in to share with us what his experience was. And he tried so many things after he got discharged from the army to deal with PTSD, but he was so traumatized that nothing worked. He went to Japan, flew to Japan, and spent months in a Zen monastery trying to meditate, and couldn't shift his mental state, was still haunted by PTSD. And then one day when he got back, he was just surfing the web, and came across eco meditation. It's a very, very simple meditation method that I advocate, but it's all evidence-based. It's all based on physical cues to your nervous system and your body. He just read the instructions, began breathing, began following them, and boom, he was in ecstasy. And he suddenly realized he could get there, and he was able to move to that state and stay there. And he then was able to release a ton of that trauma. Eco meditation also includes tapping. So he was tapping and releasing that trauma. And so you want to have that layer of trauma removed. If you're trying to enter elevated states and you close your eyes, it's hard not to think about the bad stuff. So you want to deal with your trauma. EFT is a great way to do that. Then you meditate. That's when you move into coherence. So you need both. But we need both the ability to let go of things that bother us. And even, I was tapping yesterday about something that was bothering me. And, it's not like you ever get to a point where you're so on the mountaintop that the Dalai Lama, he gets annoyed sometimes. So.
Well, does tapping bring it, does tapping bring that trauma up in the body? Does it bring it up for you to deal with, or for you to kind of filter through the body? Is that how that works?
You absolutely have to be in touch with your body. When after World War I, when all of these troops were coming back from France after fighting in France in World War I, all these Americans were coming home. And the army could tell that something was terribly wrong with them. They had no physical coordination. They had all these nightmares. We hadn't coined the term PTSD then. So they hired a psychiatrist called Abram Cardener to study these young men and figure out what was going on with them. And again, this is 50 years before the diagnosis of PTSD was ever invented. But he wrote in the Cardener report, these men have a physiological neurosis. He didn't call it a mental health problem. He said it's in the body. So absolutely. And the best-selling medical book of the last decade is called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And Bessel talks about how our body is keeping the score. Those kids who were abused as children had adverse childhood experiences. Their body keeps the score, and the score is showing up when they're 50 as cancer, heart disease, and everything else. And when you heal it, you have to go back to the body. So if you do EFT, like I do EFT workshops, I have EFT books, we have online courses. We even have an app called Stress Solution that we can just work with a EFT practitioner live in real time, like a therapy session immediately whenever you're stressed. So Stress Solution app, but whatever you choose to use, you go into the body, and that practitioner will guide you. What do you feel is in your body? Think of the childhood event. Now go into your body. Where is your body keeping the score? And as we tap, how can we release all of that trauma? And so we found in research that it takes 6 one-hour sessions for veterans with PTSD to release their trauma. And some need more, 10 sessions or more, but 6 sessions is enough to begin that process of trauma release. But again, you're not releasing it as a mental phenomenon. Like Abraham Gardner said after World War I, studying those veterans, it's trapped in the body. It's in the muscles, it's in the bones, it's in the energy field that surrounds the body. That's where you have to release it.
What's a quick tapping method that I can use before my meditation to get me into that nice little state of coherence?
Yeah, so when I wake up in the morning, I tap generally generally before I start to meditate. So I get up and go to the bathroom. I literally am there in the bathroom and I'm tapping. I just tap to release any kind of residue from nightmares, weird thoughts I woke up with, any tendency to worry about the day. So I'm just tapping through all the points. There are only 13 points total on the body you tap. It takes 2 minutes to tap through them all. I also do the 9 gamut routine, and that's really an important part of EFT. It's a series of eye movements like an EMDR, and those really are powerful in clearing distractions. So I just tap generally before I meditate, and I sit down and meditate, and my mind is clearer. I haven't got distracted. I will get distracted so quickly, Trey. I'll wake up in the morning, I'll think about the day ahead. I'll just look at something, say, on my way to the meditation area, and I'll notice something and I'll think, oh, now that leads me to think about this other thought, and suddenly I've got my whole to-do list flooding my head. So I need the tapping to release all that before I start meditation.
I can't believe how quick this hour is going. Dawson, how can people find you? How can people find out more about EFT and buy your books?
Well, a good entry point is to download the free EFT mini manual, and that's at my name, Dawson, just DAWSON, DawsonGift.com, GIFT, DawsonGift.com. Get the free mini manual, read the first chapter, and then flip to the back of the book and look at EFT on a page. It's that simple. It fits on one page. So just tap through those points, and you'll feel yourself feeling different right away. It just affects your body immediately. So DawsonGift.com is where you want to go for the mini manual. And there's also a free meditation there that in 2 clinical trials have shown, use that meditation. It's going to lower your cortisol. It's going to raise your immune function. So that meditation is also there at DawsonGift.com. For the app, just go to the App Store, Stress Solution, or if you want to look up on a tablet or a laptop, mystresssolution.com. Use the app, get a practitioner. But a lot of tapping you can just do yourself. You don't need any help with it all. And then if you want to go deeper, take a workshop. We have 1-day workshops, 4-day workshops, in-person workshops, virtual workshops, and there are workshops again for veterans. There are workshops for children and parents. There's a lot of ways to get into EFT, but a good entry point is DawsonGift.com.
Dawson, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been really fun for me.
Oh, it's been a joy. Thank you, Trey.